Husband said, "This ends tonight." Grandpa flew 6 hours for the wedding. Mom slapped me then. Oh, darlings, if you could have seen the look in his eyes that night. The way the dim light from the hallway lamp caught the hardness in his jaw, like a storm cloud gathering over the familiar hills of our little home. I remember it so clearly, even now, years later. As I sit here with a cup of chamomile tea steaming in my hands, the faint scent of lavender from the garden drifting through the open window. It was one of those moments that slices through the ordinary fabric of life, unraveling everything you thought you knew. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how a single evening shattered my world, pulling in everyone I held dear, from my aging husband to my dear old grandpa who'd crossed oceans for love, and even my own mother, whose hand I never dreamed would strike me. But let's not rush ahead. Stories like this need to breathe, to unfold like the petals of a rose in the morning dew. I'll tell it to you as it happened, from the heart, because sometimes, sharing the ache is the only way to let it go. It started, or at least that's where my mind always circles back to, in the quiet rhythm of our everyday life in that modest house on Elm Street, the one with the creaky wooden porch that groaned under the weight of too many family gatherings. I'd been married to Robert for 32 years by then, and oh, how those years had woven us together like threads in a well-worn quilt. He was the steady one, my rock, with his calloused hands from years in the auto shop, and that gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes like laugh lines etched in time. We'd raised 2 children there. Our son, Thomas, who was off building his life in the city, and our daughter, Lila, who still lived nearby with her own little family. Mornings were my favorite. I'd wake to the soft percolate of the coffee maker in the kitchen, the rich, earthy aroma filling the air as Robert shuffled in, his slippers scuffing against the linoleum floor. "Morning, Ellie," he'd say, his voice gravelly from sleep, planting a kiss on my forehead that still made my heart flutter after all these years. Our days were simple, the kind that build a life without fanfare. I'd tend to the garden out back, my fingers sinking into the cool soil as I planted tomatoes and herbs, the sun warming my shoulders while birds chirped in the old oak tree. Robert would come home smelling of motor oil and faint sweat, his flannel shirt untucked, and we'd sit at the scarred oak table for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pot roast simmering with carrots and potatoes, the steam rising like a comforting fog. We talk about the little things. How the neighbor's dog had gotten loose again, or Lila's latest worry about her toddler's teething. Laughter came easy then, the kind that bubbles up warm and unforced like the fizz in a fresh soda. Evenings, we'd settle into the living room, the worn couch sagging under us as we watched the news, his arm draped casually over my shoulders, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my arm. It was a life built on trust, on the quiet promises we'd made at our own wedding decades ago, under that same oak tree where Grandpa had walked me down the aisle. Grandpa, oh, how he was the heartbeat of our family. Elias, we called him. A wiry man with silver hair that stuck up like thistle and eyes that sparkled with stories from his youth. He'd emigrated from Ireland as a boy, but his accent lingered like a soft melody, especially when he told tales of the old country over Sunday dinners. He lived just a few towns over in a little cottage, but he was always popping in, his old pickup truck rumbling up the drive with a box of fresh-baked scones or a bottle of his homemade whiskey. "For the soul, Ellie girl," he'd wink, his voice carrying that lilt that made everything sound like poetry. Grandpa had been there for every milestone. Thomas's first steps, Lila's graduation, even when Robert lost his job back in '08 and we thought we'd lose the house. He'd sit with us in the dim kitchen light, the clock ticking steadily on the wall, and offer wisdom wrapped in humor. "Life's a river, loves," he'd say, pouring a dram, the amber liquid glinting. "You don't fight the current. You learn to swim with it." We adored him and he us, our family's North Star. My own mother, Beatrice, was part of that tapestry too, though her threads were a bit more frayed. She lived in the city now, in a tidy apartment that smelled of her lavender soap and endless cups of Earl Grey. At 78, she was sharp as a tack, with her silver bob haircut and those piercing blue eyes that could see right through you. Mom and I had our moments. She'd always been the strict one, quick with a lecture but quicker with a hug. Our calls were weekly rituals. Her voice tinny over the phone, asking about the grandkids, the garden, Robert's health. "Don't let that man work himself to the bone, Eleanor," she'd chide gently, the clink of her teacup in the background. Family was everything to us, a web of love that held us through the storms. Little did I know that web was about to tear. Thomas, our boy, had always been the ambitious one. At 35, he was making a name for himself in marketing, living in a sleek apartment downtown with his fiancée, Sarah. They'd been together for years, and we were thrilled when he announced the wedding, set for a beautiful spring day at our local chapel, with Grandpa flying in from Ireland for it. A 6-hour journey he'd take without complaint because, as he said, nothing's too far for family. The planning had been a joy. Sarah and I poring over invitations in the kitchen, the scent of fresh lemon cake wafting from the oven as we laughed over guest lists. Robert would grumble good-naturedly about the costs, but his eyes shone with pride. Life felt full, darlings. Warm, predictable, like the steady hum of the refrigerator in the quiet night. But beneath it all, I suppose, there were cracks I chose not to see. The subtle shifts that come with time and secrets unspoken. It was a Tuesday evening when the first whisper of unease crept in, like a chill draft under the door on a summer night. Robert had come home later than usual, his face drawn, the lines around his mouth deeper than I'd noticed before. He barely touched his dinner, pushing the peas around his plate with his fork, the clink of metal on porcelain echoing in the unusually quiet kitchen. "Everything all right at the shop?" I asked, reaching for his hand across the table, feeling the familiar roughness of his skin. He nodded, but his squeeze was half-hearted, his eyes flicking away to the window where the sunset painted the sky in bruised purples. "Just a long day, Ellie," he murmured, his voice flat, like a radio tuned to static. I let it go, as wives do, telling myself it was fatigue, maybe the stress of the upcoming wedding expenses. But as he retreated to his workshop in the garage that night, the door clicking shut with a finality that made my stomach twist, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something small, like a loose thread, but pulling nonetheless. The next few days blurred into a pattern of avoidance. He'd leave early, return late, his kisses perfunctory, like checking a box. I'd catch him staring at his phone during meals, his thumb scrolling absently, a faint frown creasing his brow. Once, as I cleared the table, I glimpsed a text notification. A name I didn't recognize. Something like, "Meet tonight." But he snatched it away before I could read more, muttering about a work buddy. My heart quickened, a flutter of doubt I quickly smothered with chores. Folding laundry in the sun-dappled bedroom, the fresh scent of detergent grounding me, or weeding the garden where the earth was cool and forgiving. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself, hanging sheets on the line, the breeze carrying the faint neighborly scent of barbecue. Robert was loyal. We'd built this life together. But doubt, once planted, is like a weed. It roots quietly, waiting for water. Then came the phone call from Thomas, his voice bubbling with excitement over the speaker. "Mom, everything's set for the wedding. Grandpa's flight lands Friday. Can't wait to see him." I smiled, picturing Elias's grin as he stepped off the plane, his suitcase bumping behind him. But even as I chatted, Robert sat silently in his armchair, the newspaper rustling too loudly in his hands, his jaw set. That night, as I lay beside him in our bed, the sheets cool against my skin, I listened to his even breathing and wondered if the man I loved was slipping away, one unspoken word at a time. The days leading up to Grandpa's arrival felt like walking on eggshells coated in sugar. Sweet on the surface, fragile underneath. I catch Robert in small lies, the kind that start innocent but grow thorns. "Had to stay late fixing Mr. Harlan's truck," he'd say, but his phone would buzz on the nightstand at 2 a.m., the screen lighting up his face in cold blue before he silenced it quickly, too quickly. I told myself it was paranoia, the wedding stress playing tricks. After all, Thomas and Sarah were counting on us to hold everything together. The invitations had gone out, the caterer confirmed. The florist promised peonies in soft blush pink, because Sarah loved them. I busied my hands and my heart with details, ironing tablecloths until they were crisp, the steam hissing softly, folding napkins into perfect fans the way Mom taught me when I was 12. Thursday evening, Robert came home smelling faintly of perfume, not mine. It was something sharp and floral, like gardenias left too long in the sun. I noticed it the moment he leaned down to kiss my cheek. The scent clung to his collar like a secret he hadn't bothered to hide. My stomach turned over, slow and sick. I stepped back, pretending to adjust the oven mitts hanging on the hook. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice even, the same tone I used when asking about the weather. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it looked rehearsed. "Yeah, client meeting ran over." He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he busied himself at the sink, running water over hands that weren't dirty, the stream loud against the sudden quiet between us. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above the bed, clicking once every few revolutions like a metronome counting down to something I didn't want to name. Robert's breathing was too regular, too controlled. I slipped out of bed around 3, barefoot on the cool hardwood, and padded to the living room. His jacket hung over the arm of the couch. I hesitated. God forgive me, I hesitated, then reached into the pocket. A folded receipt slipped out first. Dinner for 2 at La Bella Vita, the Italian place downtown we'd gone to on our 30th anniversary. The date was last Friday. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of Chianti, 1 tiramisu to share. My hands shook so badly the paper rustled like dry leaves. Then, underneath, a small card, hotel stationery, the kind with a gold embossed logo. Room 412. Check-in. 8:47 p.m. The same night. I sat on the floor right there in the dark, knees drawn up, the receipt crumpled in my fist. The house was silent except for the refrigerator humming its low, indifferent song and the distant bark of a dog down the street. I didn't cry, not yet. I just felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest, like wet cement poured over everything warm I'd ever felt for him. Friday morning dawned too bright, too ordinary. Grandpa's flight was due in at 2:17 p.m. I drove to the airport alone because Robert said he had one last errand before the family dinner we'd planned. I stood at arrivals holding a small sign I'd made, Elias O'Connor in thick black marker, decorated with shamrocks because he always laughed at my terrible attempts at Irish pride. When he appeared through the crowd, wheeling his battered suitcase, his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Ellie girl," he called, voice carrying over the murmur of travelers. He pulled me into a hug that smelled of airplane coffee and the old tweed coat he'd worn since I was a child. His arms were thinner than I remembered, but still strong. "Look at you, still beautiful as the day you were born." I laughed, but it cracked in the middle. He pulled back, studying my face with those sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "What's wrong, love?" "Nothing," I lied, tucking my arm through his. "Just tired. Wetting nerves." He didn't press yet, but I felt his gaze linger as we walked to the car. The drive home was filled with his stories. The turbulence over the Atlantic, the terrible coffee on the plane, how the young lad in the seat next to him proposed to his girlfriend mid-flight and half the cabin cheered. I nodded, smiled, asked the right questions, but inside I was replaying that hotel receipt over and over, the numbers burning behind my eyelids. We pulled into the driveway just as Robert's truck rolled up behind us. He stepped out, smile wide and practiced, arms open. "Elias, you old goat. You made it." Grandpa embraced him warmly, clapping him on the back. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, son. My great-grandson's getting hitched." Robert's eyes flicked to me for half a second, searching, maybe guilty, before he looked away. That evening we gathered in the backyard under strings of fairy lights I'd hung the week before. The air smelled of charcoal and marinated steaks, the sizzle of meat on the grill punctuating the laughter. Thomas and Sarah arrived with a bottle of champagne. Lila brought her toddler, who toddled straight into Grandpa's lap demanding stories. Robert played the perfect host, refilling glasses, joking with Thomas about bachelor party disasters that never happened, kissing my temple when he passed behind my chair. But every time his hand brushed my shoulder, I felt the ghost of that perfume. Every time he laughed too loudly, I heard the lie beneath it. After dinner, as the sky turned indigo and the crickets started their chorus, I excused myself to the kitchen to fetch more ice. The screen door slapped shut behind me. I stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at my reflection in the dark window. Older than I felt, eyes shadowed. That's when Robert followed me in. He closed the door softly. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. "Ellie," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I turned slowly. My heart hammered so hard I thought he could hear it. He looked tired, truly tired, not the performance kind. His shoulders sagged. "This ends tonight." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread through me. "What ends?" My voice came out small. He swallowed. "Us. This charade. I've been seeing someone. For 8 months. 8 months. The number echoed in my skull like a gunshot in an empty church. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for him to say he was joking, that it was all a cruel prank. But he just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. "Who?" The word scraped out of my throat. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." He sighed, rubbed his face with both hands. "Her name is Claire. She works at the parts supplier downtown. It started as coffee. Then it wasn't. Coffee. The same coffee he'd stopped drinking with me months ago because it kept him up." I felt the room tilt. "And the hotel?" I whispered. His head snapped up. "You went through my jacket. I found a receipt. And a key card." Silence stretched thin and sharp between us. "I was going to tell you after the wedding," he said finally. "I didn't want to ruin it for Thomas." A laugh tore out of me. Ugly, jagged. "You were going to let our son get married thinking his parents were still us. And then what? Hand me divorce papers with the cake still in the fridge." I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing. My voice rose despite myself. The right thing was never starting it. The right thing was telling me 8 months ago, instead of letting me plan centerpieces and smile for photos while you. I stopped. The words tasted like bile. He stepped closer. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "Don't come near me. Ellie, I still love you. I don't know what happened. I got scared. The kids are grown, we're getting older, and Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare make this about aging. Don't make this my fault." He looked stricken. For a moment I almost believed the pain in his eyes was real. Then the screen door creaked open. Mom stood there, purse still on her shoulder. She'd driven up that afternoon to help with last-minute preparations. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line. "I heard," she said simply. Robert flinched. Mom looked at me, then at him. Her eyes, those eyes that had raised me with iron and tenderness, filled with something dangerous. "You fool," she said to Robert, voice low and lethal. "You absolute fool." Then she turned to me and slapped me, hard, across the face. The sound cracked through the kitchen like lightning. My cheek burned. My ears rang. I staggered back, hand flying to my skin. "Mom? You let him do this to you?" she hissed. "You let him stand there and talk about love while he's been lying in another woman's bed? And you just stood here, quiet, like always?" Tears sprang to my eyes. Not from the slap, but from the truth in her words. "I didn't know," I whispered. "You suspected," she shot back. "I know you, Eleanor. You've been tiptoeing around this man for years, afraid to rock the boat. And look where it's gotten you." Robert opened his mouth. "Beatrice, get out," Mom said, not even looking at him. "Get out of this house. Now." He hesitated. "Now," she barked. He left. The screen door banged shut behind him. We heard his truck start, gravel crunching as he backed out. I sank to the floor, back against the cabinets. The tiles were cold through my dress. Mom knelt beside me, slowly, joints creaking. She gathered me into her arms the way she had when I was small and the world felt too big. "I'm sorry I hit you," she murmured into my hair. "I was angry. At him. At you for not seeing. At myself for not teaching you better." I cried then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. Outside, the fairy lights still twinkled. Laughter floated from the backyard. Grandpa was telling a story. Thomas was laughing. Sarah's voice chimed in. They had no idea the world had just cracked open. The slap echoed in my ears long after the sound faded. A sharp sting that bloomed into a dull ache on my cheek. I could feel the heat of it, the imprint of Mom's palm like a brand, but it was nothing compared to the raw wound opening in my chest. We stayed there on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, though the old clock on the wall ticked past only 20 minutes. Mom held me, her arms steady despite her age, the faint scent of her lavender soap mixing with the lingering aroma of grilled steaks from outside. Her breathing was even, controlled, but I could feel the tremor in her shoulders, the anger she held in check for my sake. "Breathe, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice soft now, laced with regret. "Just breathe. We'll sort this. Sort this." As if a marriage of 32 years could be mended like a torn hem. But in that moment, with tears streaming hot down my face, her words were a lifeline. I pulled back slightly, searching her eyes. Those same eyes that had watched over me through childhood fevers and teenage heartbreaks. "Why did you hit me?" I asked, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. Not accusing, just needing to understand. She sighed, cupping my cheek gently where the slap had landed, her touch cool and apologetic. "Because I saw my own mistakes in you, love. I stayed quiet too many times in my own marriage. Your father, God rest him, had his ways, and I let them slide until it was too late. I didn't want you repeating that. But that's no excuse. I was wrong to lash out like that." Her thumb brushed away a tear, and for the first time that night, I saw vulnerability in her, the cracks in her armor. We rose slowly, my legs unsteady, like a fawn finding its footing. The party sounds from the backyard filtered in, Grandpa's booming laugh, the clink of glasses, Lila's toddler giggling at something silly. Felt like another world, one I didn't belong to anymore. Mom straightened her blouse, smoothed her hair and said, "Go wash your face. I'll handle the guests. Tell them Robert had to run an errand or something. We keep this quiet until after the wedding. For Thomas." I nodded numbly, moving to the sink on autopilot. The cold water splashed against my skin, shocking some sense back into me. I stared at my reflection. Red-rimmed eyes, flushed cheek, lips trembling. Who was this woman staring back? Not the wife who'd planned a perfect rehearsal dinner. Not the mother beaming at her son's joy. Just broken. By the time I stepped back outside, Mom had already woven a story. Robert's truck had broken down on the way back from the store, and he'd have to tow it. Thomas frowned a bit. "Dad's truck? It's practically new." But Sarah squeezed his hand, and Grandpa raised his glass in a toast to absent friends and family mending what's broke. The irony twisted in my gut like a knife, but I forced a smile, sipping my wine until it burned going down. The evening dragged on under the stars, fairy lights twinkling like false promises. Grandpa pulled me aside at one point, his hand on my arm, voice low. "You're not yourself tonight, Ellie girl. What's eating at you?" I almost told him, spilled it all right there amid the laughter, but the words stuck. "Just wedding jitters." I lied again, hating the taste of it. He eyed me skeptically but nodded, patting my hand. "Rivers bend, love. They don't break. If only it were that simple." The wedding day arrived like a thief in the night. Too soon, too bright. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, mocking the shadows under my eyes. Robert hadn't come home. His side of the bed was cold, the pillow untouched. I texted him once, a simple, "Where are you?" No reply. Mom stayed over, brewing strong coffee in the kitchen, the rich bitterness filling the air as she moved with purpose. "He'll show," she said, though we both knew it was more hope than certainty. Men like him don't miss their son's big day. Grandpa was up early too, humming an old Irish tune as he shaved in the guest bathroom, the razor scraping rhythmically. He'd flown 6 hours for this, cross time zones and jet lag, all for a family he cherished. The thought of him learning the truth made my throat tighten. I dressed in the bridal suite at the chapel later that morning. Sarah in her gown, radiant and nervous, me and my mother of the groom dress, a soft blue that now felt like a costume. "You okay, Mom?" Sarah asked, adjusting her veil, her reflection in the mirror catching mine. She looked so young, so full of promise. "You seem distant." I forced brightness into my voice. "Just emotional. Can't believe my boy's getting married." We hugged, her perfume, fresh and floral, reminding me painfully of the one on Robert's collar. Outside, guests milled about, the air buzzing with chatter and the scent of blooming lilacs from the garden. Then the doors opened, and there was Robert. He slipped in quietly, dressed in his best suit, tie slightly askew. His eyes met mine across the aisle, red-rimmed, shadowed. He mouthed sorry, but it hung empty in the air. Grandpa was already seated, beaming at Thomas, who stood tall at the altar. The ceremony began with strings of violins swelling, vows exchanged in voices thick with love. I watched my son pledge forever to Sarah, tears blurring my vision, while beside me, Robert shifted uncomfortably, his hand hovering as if to take mine but pulling back. Afterward, the reception in the church hall was a whirlwind. Tables laden with roast chicken and potato salad, the clatter of silverware and bursts of laughter. Grandpa danced with Sarah, his steps lively despite the long flight, twirling her under the chandelier lights. "To new beginnings," he toasted, glass raised high. Thomas pulled me onto the floor for a father-son-mother dance, but it was just us three. Robert stood at the bar, nursing a drink, avoiding my gaze. It was during the cake cutting that the dam finally broke. Mom cornered me in the hallway outside the hall, her face set like granite. "He's here, but he's not yours anymore. You need to confront him now before this festers." "I can't," I whispered, glancing back at the party. "Not today." Her eyes flashed. "You will. For you, Eleanor. Not for him." She marched me back in, straight to Robert, who was alone by the window, staring out at the parking lot. The music swelled behind us, a slow waltz masking our voices. "Robert," Mom said sharply. He turned, startled. "Eleanor, save it." Mom cut in. "You've had your fun. Now face it." He looked between us, then sighed. "Claire's waiting outside, in the car. She drove me here." The words hit like another slap. "Waiting," as if this were a casual errand. "You brought her? To our son's wedding." My voice cracked, louder than intended. Heads turned. A few guests paused in their conversations. Robert's face paled. "I didn't mean, I just needed a ride. After last night." Mom stepped forward, voice rising. "You needed a ride? From your mistress? While your wife sits here pretending. Have you no shame?" The room quieted. Thomas approached, brow furrowed. "Mom? What's going on?" Grandpa was right behind him, his face darkening as he pieced it together. I turned to Robert, the ache bursting free. "Tell them. Tell our son what you've done." He hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. Halting, ashamed. The affair, the hotel, the lies. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Lila clutched her husband. Grandpa's face crumpled. Not in anger, but sorrow. "You flew me across the ocean for this, Robert? For a family in pieces." His voice, that beloved lilt, broke on the last word. Mom, ever the firebrand, didn't hold back. "Get out, both of you. This is a day for joy, not your filth." Claire, petite, blonde, looking mortified in the doorway, tried to slip away, but eyes followed her. Whispers started. "Is that her? At the wedding?" Robert grabbed his jacket, face ashen. "I'm sorry, Ellie. To all of you. But sorry doesn't mend what's shattered." As he left, the door swinging shut behind him, the hall fell silent. Thomas looked at me, eyes wide with betrayal. "Mom, why didn't you say something?" I had no answer, just the weight of it all pressing down. Mom pulled me into a hug then, right there in front of everyone. "Because she's stronger than she knows," she said to the room. "And we'll get through this. Together." But in that moment, Strength felt like a distant dream. The cake sat half-cut on the table, frosting melting in the warmth. A symbol of sweetness turned sour. The rest of the reception blurred. Guests murmuring condolences. Grandpa toasting resilience with a shaky hand. His 6-hour flight now feeling like a futile gesture. Thomas danced with Sarah. But the joy was dimmed, shadows lingering. I sat in a corner, nursing a cup of punch that tasted like regret. Mom by my side, her presence a quiet anchor. That night, back home, the house felt cavernous without Robert. Grandpa stayed over, insisting, his suitcase by the couch. We sat in the living room, the clock ticking solemnly, sharing a pot of tea that steamed faintly. "Betrayal's a bitter pill, Ellie," he said softly, stirring his cup, the spoon clinking. "But it don't define ya. You're the river, remember? Bend, but don't break." Mom nodded, her hand on mine. "And if he thinks he can slink back, he'll learn otherwise." I cried again, but softer this time, release, not despair. The slap from earlier? It lingered, not as pain, but as a wake-up call. I'd been slapped awake. Little did I know, the real consequences were just beginning to unfold. The days after the wedding blurred into a haze of hushed conversations and the kind of silence that presses in like fog on a coastal morning. Our home, once filled with the easy rhythm of family life, the sizzle of breakfast eggs, the creak of floorboards under familiar steps, now echoed with emptiness. Robert's things were still there, scattered like remnants of a life half-lived. His coffee mug on the counter, stained with the dark rings of mornings past. His work boots by the door, caked in garage dust. But he didn't come back. Not that first night, nor the next. I'd stare at the phone, willing it to ring, but it stayed stubbornly quiet, the screen dark as my hopes. Grandpa extended his stay, bless him. Those 6 hours across the Atlantic turning into a week, then 2, as he shuffled around the house in his slippers, brewing pots of strong tea that filled the air with its tannic bite. "No sense rushing back to an empty cottage," he'd say, his Irish lilt softening the edges of my grief. He'd sit with me at the kitchen table in the mornings, sunlight slanting through the window onto the checkered cloth, and we'd talk, or rather, he'd talk, weaving stories of his own losses. The wife he'd buried young, the siblings lost to the sea. "Pains like the tide, Ellie girl," he'd murmur, his gnarled hand over mine, skin paper thin but warm. "It comes in fierce, but it always ebbs." Mom was there too, driving up every other day with groceries and her no-nonsense advice. Her car crunching over the gravel drive like a punctuation mark to our unraveling. Thomas called daily, his voice thick with a mix of anger and concern over the line. "Mom, I can't believe Dad would do this. Especially at my wedding. Sarah's furious. She won't even say his name." I'd hear the hurt beneath his words, the boy in him grappling with the man his father had become. Lila stopped by with her little one, the toddler's sticky fingers tugging at my skirt as she babbled about Gamma's sad face, oblivious to the undercurrents. "We love you, Mom," Lila would say, hugging me tight, her perfume a soft cloud of vanilla. He's the one who lost out. But their support, while a bomb, couldn't erase the questions gnawing at me. How long had he planned this? Was Claire the only one? And what about us, the family he'd sworn to protect? I needed answers, real ones, not the half-truths Robert had spat out at the reception. So, on a Tuesday afternoon, with Grandpa napping in the guest room and Mom off running errands, I decided to act. My hands trembled as I pulled on a light jacket, the one with the deep pockets, and slipped out to my old sedan. The engine turned over with a familiar rumble, and I drove downtown, the streets passing in a blur of shop fronts and pedestrians hurrying along sidewalks. The auto shop where Robert worked loomed ahead, its bays open to the afternoon sun, the clang of tools and smell of oil hitting me like a wave of memories. I parked across the street, heart pounding, and watched. There he was, under the hood of a pickup, sleeves rolled up, grease smudged on his forearms. He looked ordinary. The same man who'd fixed my bike when I was 10, who'd held me through miscarriages we'd never spoken of. But then she appeared, Claire, emerging from the office with a clipboard, her laugh light as she handed him a rag. She was younger, yes, with hair that caught the light like spun gold, but it was the ease between them that gutted me. The way she touched his arm, casual yet intimate, the way he smiled at her. Not the practiced grin from the wedding, but something real, unguarded. I sat there for an hour, engine off, the car growing stuffy with the scent of old leather seats. They talked, heads close, then she leaned in for a quick kiss. Chaste, but it might as well have been a declaration. My chest tightened, breath coming shallow. Part of me wanted to storm over, demand the full story right there amid the wrenches and tires. But dignity held me back. I wasn't ready for a scene. Instead, I drove to the parts supplier next, a squat building with a sign faded by years of weather. Claire worked there, Robert had said. I parked and waited, watching employees come and go during their break. When she stepped out for a smoke, leaning against the wall with a cigarette between her fingers, the cherry glowing as she inhaled. I approached. My legs felt like lead, each step deliberate on the cracked pavement. Claire. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She startled, dropping ash, her eyes widening. Up close, she looked tired. Fine lines around her mouth, makeup not quite hiding the shadows. Yes? Can I help you? I'm Eleanor, Robert's wife. The words tasted bitter, like oversteeped tea. Her face drained of color, the cigarette forgotten. Oh, God. I'm sorry. I didn't think. You didn't think he'd have a family? I kept my tone even, calm, though inside a storm raged. 8 months. Did you know that? She glanced around, nervous, the wind tugging at her blouse. It wasn't like that at first. We were just friends. He was unhappy, talked about how things had grown stale. I didn't push. It just happened. Unhappy, stale. The words stung, painting our life in shades of gray I'd never seen. And now, at my son's wedding, she stubbed out the cigarette, grinding it under her heel. That was his idea. He said he needed to face it to end things properly. I waited in the car because I care about him. But I never wanted to hurt anyone. Care. The word hung between us. Fragile. I studied her, not with hate but curiosity. Was she the villain in this, or just another thread in the unraveling? Does he talk about me? About us? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. He loves you in his way, but he's scared of getting old of routine. He said you deserved better, but he couldn't leave until the wedding, until Grandpa's visit, until it was convenient. I felt a surge of anger, hot and clarifying. Tell him I know, and tell him if he wants to end it, he'll do it face to face. No more hiding behind errands or mistresses in parking lots. I turned and walked away before she could respond. My steps firmer now, the sun warm on my back. Back home, I sat in the garden, fingers tracing the dirt around a wilting rosebush, the one Robert had planted for our anniversary. Pruning shears in hand, I snipped away the dead parts, each cut deliberate. Felt symbolic, cathartic. Grandpa found me there later, settling into the Adirondack chair with a sigh. Out for a drive, were ya? I nodded, not meeting his eyes. Confronted the other woman. He chuckled softly, not mocking but approving. Brave girl. And she's real, human, but that doesn't make it right. I set the shears down, dirt under my nails. I think I'm ready to talk to him now. That evening, as the sky bruised into twilight, Robert's truck pulled into the drive. He stepped out slowly, hands in pockets, looking smaller somehow. Mom had arrived just before, sensing the moment, and she stood with me at the door, arms crossed. Grandpa watched from the window, a silent sentinel. We sat in the living room, me on the couch, him in the armchair across, the space between us vast as an ocean. The lamp cast warm pools of light, but shadows clung to his face. Ellie, he started, voice rough. I didn't come back to beg, but I owe you the truth. Then give it, I said quietly. Mom hovered in the doorway, her presence a shield. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Claire, she's exciting, new, but it's not love, not like what we had. I got lost, felt invisible in our routine. The shop's the same every day, home's the same. I panicked. Routine. Mom interjected, voice sharp. 32 years of building a life, raising kids, and you call it routine? You're a coward, Robert. He winced. I know. I ended it with her today. Told her it's over. My heart stuttered, relief, doubt, just like that. He met my eyes finally, just like that, because seeing the hurt at the wedding, on Thomas's day with Elias there after flying all that way, it hit me. I almost destroyed everything for a fling. Grandpa emerged then, his footsteps soft on the carpet. You did, lad, but destruction's not final if you rebuild right. He placed a hand on Robert's shoulder, not forgiving yet, but open. What now? Robert looked at me, pleading. I want to come home, counseling, whatever it takes, but if you say no, I'll respect it. I sat there, the clock ticking like a heartbeat. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to let him taste the loneliness he'd inflicted. But another part, the one that remembered our vows, the quiet nights, yearned for repair. Not tonight, I said finally. Go to a hotel, think on it, and call Thomas. Tell him yourself. He nodded, standing slowly. At the door he paused. I love you, Ellie. Always have. The door clicked shut. Mom exhaled, sinking onto the couch. You did well, Eleanor. Strong. Grandpa poured us all a small whiskey, his homemade, the burn welcome. To choices, he toasted, glass clinking hours. But as I sipped, the liquid fire in my throat, I wondered if love could truly mend what trust had broken. The next morning brought the first ripple of public consequence. Thomas had told Lila, and word spread like wildfire through our small community. The auto shop crowd, church friends, even the neighbors who'd waved at us for years. By noon, my phone buzzed with texts. Heard about Robert. I'm so sorry. A call from the pastor. Would you like to talk? Or join us for coffee? At the grocery store that afternoon, Mrs. Harlan from down the street pulled me aside in the produce aisle. The scent of fresh apples heavy in the air. Eleanor, dear. I saw Claire at the diner last week with him. If there's anything. I thanked her, cheeks burning. But inside, a quiet resolve built. Robert faced it too. At work, whispers followed him. Parts orders delayed by awkward silences. One evening, he called. The guys at the shop know. They're giving me the cold shoulder. Even Harlan won't let me touch his truck anymore. Good. I said, no malice, just truth. Actions have echoes. Claire, it turned out, quit the supplier job. Rumors flew that her coworkers shunned her. The small-town grapevine twisting the tale until she was the homewrecker in every version. She moved away, or so the talk went, leaving behind a cloud of judgment. Family felt it deepest. Thomas confronted Robert over lunch at a neutral diner, the clatter of dishes underscoring their words. You humiliated Mom at my wedding, Dad. Grandpa flew 6 hours for that. Robert hung his head, voice breaking. I know, son. I'm trying to fix it. But trust, once cracked, lets doubt seep in. Sarah pulled back, polite but distant at family calls. Lila's husband suggested we all see a mediator. His voice steady over speakerphone. Mom, ever the enforcer, spread the word selectively, to her bridge club old friends, ensuring Robert's circle knew the cost. He needs to feel the weight, she told me one night, her tea cooling untouched. Not revenge, justice. And Grandpa? He stayed until the sting dulled, his presence a bridge to healing. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance, he said, I flew those hours not just for the wedding, but for you, Ellie. Family's worth the journey, even the hard ones. The consequences weren't cruel spectacles, no public shaming or dramatic falls, but quiet erosions. Robert's isolation at the shop, Claire's hasty exit, our family's cautious rebuilding. It was justice served in whispers and sidelong glances, reminding everyone that betrayal doesn't stay private in a web as tight as ours. Through it all, I planned not revenge but reclamation. I started journaling in the quiet hours, pages filling with the hurt and the hopes. Signed up for a class at the community center, yoga, to stretch out the knots in my soul. And slowly, the house began to feel like mine again, not ours. But the real test was yet to come. The weeks that followed Robert's confession on the porch felt like walking through fog, thick, disorienting, every step uncertain. He didn't come home right away. I asked for space, and to his credit, he gave it. He rented a small furnished apartment above the hardware store on Main Street, the kind of place with thin walls and mismatched furniture that smelled faintly of previous tenants' cooking. He texted once a day, simple messages. Thinking of you. Thomas called. We talked. I missed the garden. I read them in the quiet kitchen at dawn, the first light catching the steam from my coffee, and felt equal parts tenderness and rage. How dare he miss the garden he'd helped ruin? Counseling started 3 weeks later. A woman named Dr. Patel in the next town over, her office small and softly lit, smelling of sandalwood and old books. We sat on opposite ends of a beige couch, a box of tissues between us like a truce flag. Robert arrived first each time, already seated, hands clasped tight in his lap. His wedding ring was still on. Mine had come off the night of the reception and stayed in the jewelry box, gathering dust beside earrings I no longer wore. The first session was mostly silence. Dr. Patel asked gentle questions. What brought you here? What do you hope to find? And we answered in fragments. Robert spoke of fear. Fear of aging, fear of irrelevance, fear that the best parts of life were behind us. I spoke of betrayal. Not just the affair, but the months of quiet lies, the way he'd let me plan a wedding while planning an exit. I felt invisible, I said, voice cracking on the last word. Robert flinched as though I'd struck him. We went weekly. Some sessions ended in tears, mine mostly, others in anger, his defensiveness flaring when I asked why he never said anything sooner. I didn't want to hurt you, he'd repeat, and I'd counter. You hurt me more by staying silent. Dr. Patel never took sides. She simply held space, letting the truth surface slowly, like sediment settling in a glass of water. At home, life rearranged itself around the absence. I slept in the middle of the bed now, no longer hugging the edge. I rearranged the living room furniture, moved the armchair Robert loved to the corner, brought in a small reading lamp for myself. The garden got more attention than ever. I planted new roses, deep crimson ones that bloomed defiant against the fence. Grandpa had gone back to Ireland after 6 weeks, promising to return for Christmas, but not before leaving me with one last piece of advice on the porch the morning he left. Don't forgive too fast, Ellie girl, he said, suitcase at his feet. But don't close the door forever either. Sometimes love needs time to find its way back. Mom stayed fierce. She came over every Sunday with a casserole or a pie, setting it on the counter with a decisive clunk. He's got to earn his way back, she'd say, slicing tomatoes for salad, the knife thwacking rhythmically against the cutting board. And if he doesn't, you've still got us. Always. Her presence was a steady drumbeat, reliable, unapologetic. She even started a small book club with Lila and a few neighbors, insisting I join. You need voices other than your own in your head, she told me. We read novels about women who rebuilt after heartbreak. The discussions were cathartic, laced with laughter and sharp truths. Thomas and Sarah were slower to thaw. They invited me to dinner often, never Robert, not yet. Sarah would hug me extra long at the door, her arms strong and warm. We're on your side, Mom, she'd whisper. Thomas was quieter, still processing his own anger. One night, over roast lamb and roasted potatoes, he finally asked the question that had been burning in him. Do you think you'll take him back? I set my fork down, the clink loud in the sudden quiet. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. I'm learning who I am without him, and he's learning who he is without me letting him hide. If we both grow into better people, maybe, but not the same people we were. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thomas nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I just want you happy, Mom, whatever that looks like. The turning point came unexpectedly, on a rainy Thursday in late fall. Leaves plastered the driveway in wet bronze. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. I was in the kitchen making soup, carrots, celery, the low simmer of broth, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened it. Robert stood there, rain dripping from the brim of his cap, a cardboard box in his arms. Not flowers, not chocolates, just a plain brown box, damp at the corners. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. He set the box on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, the way he always did when nervous. I brought some things, he said. Letters, photos, things I found while packing up the apartment. I thought you should have them. And I wrote something. He opened the box. Inside were bundles of old letters tied with twine. Our courtship notes from the early 80s, his handwriting slanted and eager. Postcards from vacations we'd taken. A small photo album I'd forgotten about, filled with snapshots of Thomas's first birthday, Lila's kindergarten play, the four of us laughing on a beach with sunburned noses. And at the bottom, a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded once. He handed it to me without looking up. Read it when you're ready, or don't. But I needed to say it. I unfolded it slowly. Ellie, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask for it. But I need you to know what I see now. For years I told myself the problem was outside us, work, money, time passing too fast. I blamed everything except the man in the mirror. I was selfish. I was scared. And I hurt the one person who loved me when I didn't deserve it. Claire was never the answer. She was an escape. A distraction from the quiet fear that I hadn't been enough for a long time. You were always enough. I'm going to therapy on my own now, twice a week. I'm learning how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. I'm learning how to listen, really listen, without defending. If there's any chance, any small crack of light left for us, I'll wait for it. I'll earn it, day by day. No pressure, no timeline. But if the door is closed for good, I'll respect that too. I'll still love you from whatever distance you need. I'm sorry, Ellie. Not just for what I did, but for who I became while doing it. Robert. I read it twice, tears blurring the ink in places. The kitchen clock ticked steadily behind me. Rain tapped against the windows like gentle fingers. I looked at him, really looked. The lines around his eyes were deeper, the gray at his temples more pronounced. But his gaze was steady, unguarded for the first time in years. I'm not ready to say yes, I told him softly. But I'm not ready to say no forever either. He nodded, throat working. That's more than I deserve. We sat in silence for a long while, the soup bubbling forgotten on the stove. Eventually he stood. I'll go, he said, but I'll keep showing up, in the ways you allow. I walked him to the door. At the threshold he paused, rain still falling behind him. Thank you for letting me in tonight. I closed the door softly after him, leaned against it, and let the tears come. Not from pain this time, but from something gentler. Recognition. Possibility. The healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small, ordinary moments. A shared coffee on the porch one Sunday when he stopped by to fix the gutter. A walk in the park with Thomas and Sarah where we all laughed at the toddler chasing pigeons. A quiet evening when I invited him to dinner and he stayed to wash dishes, our elbows brushing at the sink like they used to. We're not back the way we were. We're something new, cautious, honest, rebuilt brick by brick. Trust is a slow-growing thing, like ivy on stone. But it's growing. Grandpa came back for Christmas, just as he promised. We decorated the tree together, the scent of pine filling the house. Robert was there too, invited, not assumed. When Grandpa raised his glass of whiskey at midnight, he looked around the room, at me, at Robert, at the kids, and said simply, "To rivers that bend, and hearts that mend." I clinked my glass against his, feeling the warmth spread through me. Life doesn't always give neat endings. Sometimes it gives second chances wrapped in scar tissue. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to stay open, those scars become the strongest parts. Oh, darlings, as I sit here now, years after that stormy evening when Robert's words, "This ends tonight," hung in the air like a thunderclap, I can still feel the echo of Mom's slap on my cheek, the way it jolted me from complacency into clarity. Grandpa's 6-hour flight, meant for celebration, became a testament to the enduring pull of family, even when it pulls you into pain. And through it all, I've learned a lesson that sits deep in my bones. Betrayal isn't the end. It's a crossroads. It forces you to choose. Cling to the broken pieces or gather the strength to rebuild something truer, perhaps even stronger. Looking back, I didn't seek revenge. I sought understanding. And in that pursuit, I found not just healing for myself, but a deeper bond with those who stood by me. Mom, with her fierce love. Grandpa, with his timeless wisdom. Thomas and the rest, weaving us tighter than before. Robert and I, we're still together, navigating the bends in our river with open eyes and honest words. It's not perfect, but it's ours, earned through tears and time. Life, my dears, is full of these moments where love is tested, where secrets shatter the ordinary. But remember, your worth isn't defined by someone else's failing. It's in how you rise, how you choose grace over grudge, strength over surrender. Hold on to that. Now, tell me, loves, have you ever faced a betrayal that changed everything? Would you have confronted it like I did, or walked away clean? Share in the comments below. Your stories remind me we're all in this river together. If this touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe for more whispers from the soul, and ring the bell so you never miss a tale. Until next time, be kind to yourselves. God bless.